Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Following Films podcast. I'm your host, Chris Maynard, and on today's episode, we'll look into one of the most surprising and potentially disruptive stories to hit the film industry in years, as well as share my interview with Sonnet Daymont about her work on The Woman in the Yard. President Donald Trump announced over the weekend that he's proposing a 100% tariff on all films made outside of the U.S. That's right, 100%. According to Trump, this drastic move is intended to bring movies back to America and reverse what he calls the fast decline of Hollywood. So today, we're going to break this down, what it means for the U.S. film industry and how it could affect global filmmaking, and whether this kind of economic nationalism can actually work in the entertainment world. Let's start with the basics. On Truth Social, the president posted that he has authorized the Department of Commerce and the U.S. Trade Representative to begin the process of implementing the tariff. The reasoning? Well, in Trump's words, Hollywood is dying a very fast death. And while that kind of hyperbolic talk is typical for Trump, it's worth asking, does he have a point? In fairness, the American film industry has been through the ringer over the past few years. COVID-19 shut down productions across the country, and just as things were starting to recover, the 2023 actors and writers strike brought filmmaking to a halt again, and then there were wildfires disrupting production on the West Coast earlier this year. So we're looking at a string of back-to-back-to-back hits to a sector already grappling with changes in viewing habits. Streaming platforms like YouTube, TikTok, and specialized services has siphoned off younger audiences. While theatrical attendance still hasn't fully bounced back, according to Variety, production budgets were slashed in 2024, dropping by about 20% from pre-pandemic levels. But to be fair, 2025 is actually showing some recovery. Box office revenue is up almost 16% so far this year. So the question still stands, is Hollywood dying? Maybe not. Struggling, for sure. But Trump's diagnosis may be more about perception rather than data. Still, his solution is clear. Punish foreign films with steep tariffs to incentivize studios to shoot domestically. Let's talk about what that could actually look like. The idea of a 100% tariff raises more questions than it answers. For one, what exactly counts as a foreign film? Many major American studio films, Deadpool and Wolverine, Gladiator 2, even Barbie, were shot entirely or partially overseas. Would these be subject to tariffs? They're produced by U.S. companies, funded by U.S. investors, and distributed by American studios. But if production took place in the UK or Canada, does that mean they'd be taxed? And what about co-productions? A growing number of films today are multinational collaborations, often funded and filmed across several countries. There's no clear answer yet from the administration about how these would be classified. The White House, for its part, has offered little clarity. A spokesperson recently said no final decisions have been made, and that the administration is exploring all options. But in typical Trump fashion, the public announcement came before the policy details were even worked out. Let's talk about digital distribution. The World Trade Organization currently has a moratorium on tariffs for digital goods until 2026, and that includes streaming films. So would the tariff only apply to theatrical releases, or would Netflix have to pay a fee for licensing a foreign-produced film for American audiences? Again, no one really knows yet. Now, from a legal standpoint, there's even more confusion. California Governor Gavin Newsom, who's no fan of Trump, has said that the president likely lacks the legal authority to impose such tariffs under the International Economic Emergency Powers Act. And if that's the case, we could be in for a lengthy court battle before any of this becomes a reality. Let's zoom out for a second and think about this globally. The US isn't the only place that benefits from Hollywood. The UK, for example, has become a powerhouse in international film production. Big-budget American movies regularly shoot in London's Pinewood studios, taking advantage of the world-class facilities and generous tax breaks. Same goes for Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and many others. In the UK, government officials and industry leaders are already sounding the alarm. Dame Caroline Dinenage, who chairs the Culture, Media, and Sports Committee, called the potential tariff a serious threat. They warned that this move could be a knockout blow to an industry still recovering from the pandemic. And it's not just rhetoric. If American companies can't afford to shoot abroad or bring foreign films to the US, thousands of freelancers, technicians, set builders, costume designers, entire ecosystems of professionals could lose their jobs. Christy Bell, the CEO of Goldfinch, pointed out that Barbie, which was shot almost entirely in the UK, wouldn't have existed under these rules. And she's blunt. If these tariffs go through, freelancers are going to be jobless. Australia and New Zealand have also issued statements supporting their film sectors, promising to defend them in trade discussions. And speaking of trade, what if other countries retaliate? That's the other half of this equation. If the US slaps tariffs on foreign films, what's to stop the EU or China or India from doing the same to American films entering their markets? That would be disastrous. International box office accounts for a huge percentage of revenue for most major Hollywood productions. A trade war in entertainment could hurt the very industry Trump is trying to protect. So what's the end game here? Could tariffs drive more productions back to the US? Possibly, but only if paired with serious tax incentives and infrastructure investment. Right now, several US states like Georgia, Kentucky, and Illinois already offer strong incentives that draw production away from California. Governor Newsom is pushing to increase California's own incentives to $750 million annually in a bid to compete. But if producing films in the US remains more expensive, studios might just scale down or cancel projects altogether rather than absorb the extra cost. Eric Deegan's a film critic for NPR, warned that the tariffs might end up causing more harm than good. Other countries might respond with tariffs of their own, making it harder for American films to turn a profit internationally. So at the end of the day, this policy might not protect American jobs. In fact, it might jeopardize them. Hollywood is a global industry. Always has been, always will be. While there's nothing wrong with trying to bring more production home, we have to ask, are tariffs the right tool for the job? Or are they just a blunt instrument to break the very system they're supposed to fix? That's it for the news section of today's episode. I'd love to hear what you think. Is this move going to revitalize American cinema? Or is it just another example of political theater? You can follow us on Blue Sky by going to @followingfilms.com, or you can send your thoughts directly to contact@followingfilms.com. Now to my interview with Sonnet Daymont. She's recognized for her expertise in addressing a wide range of issues, including post-traumatic stress disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, social anxiety, panic attacks, and phobias. In addition to her therapeutic work, Sonnet is a horror film consultant and is currently writing When Dangerous Feels Like Home, a powerful true crime memoir about healing from trauma. I had her on the show today to talk about her consulting work on The Woman in the Yard, the latest Blumhouse release, which is currently available on VOD. I hope you enjoyed the show. Thanks. So how's your day going so far today?
It's going. It's a little busy. It's a little different than my normal. I'm trying to get in a position where you can hear me because I'm,
You sound fine. You sound good.
You can hear me okay with the internet here? Okay,
yeah.
Great.
Yeah, you're good. You're good. So it's been a hectic day for you today?
Yeah, I'm on a writing residency, so I've got this little deadline of how much writing I'm supposed to do every day. And
oh no.
I'm like in a little bit of a rural area, so it feels like cabin fever because I've been in here writing for like a week.
How do you do under deadlines, writing under pressure like that?
So this is new, but I think that it is actually a little easier because I have like a focus, right? There's some accountability. But at the same time, that can be distracting too, the pressure part.
Of course, yeah. I like to get things out right away, and I hate writing. And it's something that I think I have to have that pressure to get it done because I will procrastinate forever and just never do it. So, despite somebody who writes every day. So, yeah. So how did you end up bridging your career in psychology to working as an advisor on films?
So I'm available to consult or chip in with anyone. Like if you look at my website, you'll see I've contributed to a lot of different magazine articles and podcasts, and I just happen to be at the screening for that film and around that film a bit.
Hmm.
You wanted to talk about Woman in the Yard today.
Really, anything.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, wherever
And
conversation goes, I'm fine with
so
it.
that one, I feel like you can't see you very well.
Oh,
There's brightness behind me, but as long as you can see my face, we're
yeah,
good.
yeah, yeah. I can see it.
Um, I yeah, I was there with my partner who was their VFX supervisor for one of the
Hmm.
screenings. And then I ended up going when they were shooting parts of the film in Georgia and like walked through the set and the film is about child abuse, which you
Yeah.
saw, right? And I'm working on a book about child abuse right now. And that's a lot of what I treat as a trauma therapist. So it was easy for me to get sort of engaged in what they were doing and chat them up a little bit.
Well, it's interesting because we're in this era of filmmaking with genre films, horror films specifically, where a lot of them are about trauma, trying to deal with trauma instead of what happened in the kind of 80s, 90s horror films that were just body count movies. And how accurate they speak to trauma, but I'm not sure how well trauma is actually represented in film.
It it depends on the film.
Okay.
This one I thought was really interesting to me because there's no way to watch that film without looking at yourself in order
Oh,
to interpret it. Like you have to
yeah.
look at your own childhood or your own parenting, and then it kind of checks the person. So so it has a scary message and theme,
Yes.
and at the same time you can't even really interpret it unless you look at yourself. I thought it was a pretty cool piece of art.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the best art is the kind that gets you to internalize and reflect. And while not my experience by any stretch of the imagination, there is that part that as a parent, I have a 9-year-old and a 14-year-old, that you think, okay, what are the things that I'm doing? What am I modeling? What am I showing? And what is the impact that these things are going to have, intentional and otherwise? And so we have to be very thoughtful in the way we parent and the way that we deal with our own past. Because, I have 4 brothers and sisters. If you ask us about our childhood, you will hear 5 wildly different stories about how we were raised, even though we were all raised in the same household.
Yeah.
So there is something unique that happens, even though it, it seems like trauma is very individual, even though I'm sure there's universal truths about it, but the way that we process seems pretty unique.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's pretty common with every family. The siblings will get together and sort of interpret things a little differently from each other.
Exactly, exactly. And then when you go watch a film like this, are you able to distance yourself, take off your work hat, and just enjoy the movie for what it is? Or is it something where you always view it through a clinical eye?
I um I have a hard time not viewing everything. Everything. I have to kind of check myself a lot and like kind of quiet and get playful while I'm like talking to people or just out in the world so that I can just be in the present and not be analyzing. Yeah.
Okay, so how that is that a challenge for you then to turn that off and to be in the present? Because that's something that we I think we all function on multiple levels at the same time where you are thinking you're in the moment and being present, but then you're also thinking about the things that you're going to say, how people are reacting to you. I think it's almost impossible to be fully present and reactionary. You are always thinking about the things that are happening to you in the moment that you're in. And for me, I absolutely take my professional bias and things that I see every day and apply that to it. I would imagine though that there's either one of two things that would happen with someone like you, whether people are going to ask or try to invite too much personal advice in a place that's wildly inappropriate, or they'll say, you're just talking to somebody and they'll say, no, no, I don't need the therapist right now. And you're just trying to have a normal conversation. Do those things happen?
I think it's probably different for every therapist
Okay.
and how we organize it and all that. I think in my experience and where I'm at this point in my life, I really tend to just stay quiet unless I'm invited. And then I try to ask for consent before I give any kind of analysis or judgment my best. But for the most part, I just want to, have moments when I'm not working and I don't have to think like that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Especially thinking about dark triad, things like that. I would imagine that's something that a welcome sort of reprieve from that, some to let go of those thoughts for a while. Because layman like myself, I think I will probably misuse a word like narcissism frequently when somebody could just be selfish or self-centered. And narcissism, I think, is probably it's a clinical term that we often misapply to individuals.
Yeah, it is a clinical term. It's also kind of a social construct at the same time because
Explain that.
like we as humans created all of these disorders that we the DSM, right?
True.
And
Yeah.
ICD-10. And if someone uses the word narcissism and someone's just super selfish, I know what they mean.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
with the representation of that in film, though, and that idea of these psychological issues, and I think that it's become more common to explore those ideas, something like The Babadook or something along those lines that handles that. And this is clearly a film that's about trauma or that's about those sort of darker sides, but it's done in metaphor as opposed to direct sort of showing the exact emotional. Do you find that symbolism or sort of that metaphor approach that allows people to project is a more effective approach, or do you prefer when it's more lined out and clear exactly what's going on?
Well, I think that this film, Woman in the Yard,
Women in the Yard uses that
yeah,
symbolism as well, I think.
super interesting to me because it does force the person watching it to look at themselves in order to figure out what they're seeing on the screen. Um, and that's a scary thought when you're looking at these subjects, right? And not everybody's done that work or or has it the same level of easy when they sort of think about how they parent or they think about how their childhood was.
The
So it's it's a type of horror, I guess, these psychological horrors where you kind of reflect on your own experience and interpret it that is a bit more intellectual or more like a puzzle for the viewer. And if you just went in and um, say watched one of those 80s horror movies, which were more like, here's a scary story.
yeah, exactly. And I think that the idea of being able to project yourself and having that self-reflection of film like this, it actually makes it, if you're open to it, a far more impactful film, that it can be more of a Rorschach test, I guess, where you are, it's each person will have a different experience watching the film or films like this. And you can tell a little bit more about the person by their reaction to it, possibly. Because I know that for me personally, I'm by no means a perfect parent. I try. But the best parenting advice I've ever been given was if you're being thoughtful and you're convinced that you're fucking up, you're probably doing an okay job because you're concerned about the fact that you're dropping the ball. So the fact that you think you're not doing well means you're probably, if you think you're nailing it, you're probably not doing a great job.
Yeah, I think that's a really good philosophy to take with you, right? There were these Winnicott studies where they went in and they studied parents who were the perfect parent. They had access to
Mm-hmm.
tutors and help in the home. At least one parent was supposed to stay home and tend to the children. And then they measured parents all the way through middle class parents and then down to parents who were like drug addicted and abusive. And they found that in the long term, the parents that were drug addicted and abusive um, ended up just as effective as the parents that were really privileged and had access to all the means to really pamper and spoil their children. And the kids more in the middle, where the parents would mess up and then talk about it with them afterwards and sort of do that forgiveness, problem solving, apologizing. I mess up sometimes conversation. Those were the kids who ended up with more functional, like happier lives in the future. So
Well,
I always think about that, right? Like you want to mess up a little bit. And I've heard some therapists joke about like messing up in the therapy room so that they have to talk to their clients about the mess up between them. I've never
yeah.
done it, but people do borrow that.
Oh, I love that idea. That was another thing that I read pretty early on, that it was important to apologize to your kids because we have this idea of most of us, we put our parents on pedestals, and when we're young and we think that they can do no wrong and they're superhuman. And eventually you start to see the truth of who they are, and you see them as humans and flawed, and you start to really appreciate them who for themselves, not just as this guide in your life, as this, other being. You see them as real, fully, three-dimensional beings. And when you start apologizing sooner, it gets rid of that veil. That goes away, and they realize that you make mistakes and that we're kind of both, you can do something wrong and say you're sorry. And then that shows them you're also modeling that behavior of when you screw up, it's okay to make mistakes. Just do the right thing, own it, say you're sorry, move on, make sure, learn how to actually apologize with your heart, not like that pointed apology that I did for so many years. So those kinds of things that again, not nailing it, but I think I'm getting better at it for sure. By the time they leave the house, I'll probably be pretty good at it. By the time I'm not parenting them, I think.
Yeah, I like that you use the word veil.
well, yeah, I guess that does tie it back in. So yeah, is that really what this is though? Is that barrier that we have? Is that what it's kind of what the movie is dealing with in a way? Is that thing that exists, the literal and the figurative veil that exists between families?
Could be.
Yeah. Okay. And so then you're a very busy person. And so what is it that draws you in to take on a project, to say, this is a writing project I do, this is an advisory project I want to take on, these are, clients that I want to take on? How do you balance out? Because there's so many different things that you're involved in.
So I do have a few things going on at once. I tend to look for things that energize me, where if I talk about them or think about them, I'm more awake afterwards, and then I have momentum to go keep doing the next thing. And if something feels sort of draining and I feel more tired after I engage with it, I probably won't take it on. And I think that's part of why when I do like interviews and more of the fun thing on the side of my therapy practice and my writing, I don't charge. Because it's like I want to be able to say, no, I'm not interested in talking to you right now, or I am. This is interesting to me, useful for me too. Yeah.
That is the exact same response and reasoning that I do what I'm doing right now. That this is not my day job. This is not what I do, that I have a day job, and I only generally talk to people that I'm interested in what they're doing, and that I want to hear their story. They're involved in a project, or, I've been doing this for 10 years and I've never had a chance to talk to somebody who advises films from a psychologist point of view. So that was something I was really interested in. And if this was something else, I probably would just pass, because, that's taking away time from my family. That's taking away time from whatever that would be. My dogs could go, I need to go take them on a walk before it's horribly hot out right now. So that kind of thing, that it's just, if I'm going to do something on the side, I want it to be fun. And yeah, I completely understand the energy that you get from these things, because every once in a while I'll think about stopping this, but then I do one of them and it's just, oh, now I remember why I do this, and I'm good for another 6 months. So do you have a similar sort of thing where you're like, okay, I'm in the hamster wheel for too long, I need a break from this, and then just something clicks?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's sort of the way it is with anything creative, right? Like we need to take those breaks from our creative process and reevaluate if we're doing things that are energizing us, draining us, if it's matching our values, all of that. And it sounds like what you're saying is you have these moments where you're like, I should probably be giving more to my dogs than my family. And then you come in and you're like, wait, I did another one of these and I have more energy for my dogs and my family. That was a good idea.
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't imagine. I have to have some sort of creative outlet. That's just the way that I'm wired. It doesn't need to be the center of my life, but every day I'll pick up an instrument, I'll write, I'll do something that just is, to me, it's a form of therapy. It's meditative, I guess, where I can lose myself in the process of creation, as opposed to going through bills, going through, all the little things that take up the day to day of your life, and, running errands or whatever that happens to be. That distraction, that thing, even if it's only for 5 minutes, is something that absolutely makes me a better parent, a better spouse, a better, dog owner, all those things. Yes, it definitely makes me a better person.
Nice. Yeah, that's the point, right?
Yeah. So do you feel like you have, I watched a documentary recently, and the idea of it was joining. That if you join a club, if you join, you find like-minded people that have an interest in anything. It doesn't matter what it is, you'll live longer. And so it's just by being a part of a community that's outside of yourself, you'll feel connected to people in a way you may hadn't thought about before. You could have people from all different political perspectives, but they all like a type of movie, they like a type of music, they like taking pictures of birds, on a Sunday morning. So whatever that thing is, if you find something outside of yourself and join and find community, do you think that that is possible to do, or you're doing something similar to that in these types of ventures in your writing and through your advising and those kinds of things, that it's giving you that extra sort of zest for your life?
The connection.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about it to that degree, but I think you're right. Um, I also think, it's so funny because my therapist hat came on, and usually
Please.
when people talk about joining, they come to me with the trauma of being excluded in some way,
Mm,
like whether it's like boarding school bullying or like divorce or something where they've been sort of excluded.
hmm.
And I tend to think of it as like this evolutionary need to be in the middle of a herd or a pack. Because if we're traveling with other humans and we get left out, then a bear or a wolf or something can eat us. So we have
Yeah.
this try to be in the center all the time. But you really sort of added this extra layer of like wanting to feel connected based on interests, and then what does that do for your long-term health and happiness? It's
I,
interesting.
it feels like there's something to it to me. It does feel like there's something there, but yeah, it's certainly, I know where that comes from within me because, one of five kids. There's no way that you're not going to feel like you're completely surrounded by chaos all the time, but you somehow feel utterly alone because you don't feel the center of attention at any time. And so, yes, I completely know that those two things are connected in my mind, that I can feel that. I know that what I was like when I was a kid, and I have those sort of things still going on in the back of my mind, that I have those senses of both leave me alone. I need to have time by myself to figure things out, but also it'd be really nice if while I was spending time alone, you came and sat next to me, which doesn't make any sense, but it's just how I'm wired.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like attunement, right? Like just sort
Mm.
of feeling connected to and seen.
Yeah,
Yeah. And if you
yeah.
if you think about us as animals, like we do kind of need to be in a herd in order to survive. And we have towns um and homes and all of that, so we can be with others.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's just where the more that we separate ourselves from those sort of more primal side, that we end up having to figure out what's missing. That goes back to that. We're kind of trying to figure out what are we missing from that time in our lizard brains, those early days that we no longer have, and trying to reconnect with that in different ways. And I I guess there's that part of us that survival is not as much of a threat as it once was. And as if you look at the entire history of humans at this point, so chances are we're not going to get eaten by a bear today, you or I. But our minds have that fear capacity still built in. So we sort of turn on ourselves in a way, I guess.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And just kind of seeking connection and attunement to protect against something that isn't necessarily a threat, but maybe chemically it still is.
See, you're much better at this. That's the training. I stumble through this and you're able to say it so eloquently and surmise in a much better way than I can. So, um, what's coming up next for you? Is there anything that you're working on that you're excited about?
Well, right now I'm in this library at the Hedgewick residency, and I'm finishing up a book called When Dangerous Feels Like Home, and it's like a true crime memoir,
Oh,
about why I became a therapist.
well, if you don't mind me asking, why did you become a therapist?
So the book is the story of how I came to work for Gigi Jordan, who was a pharmaceutical executive that murdered her son
Okay.
in 2009. And it was one of those stories that was just kind of all in the news. And
Hmm.
this was before, at least in my world, the internet was as big as it was. And so I would turn on my TV and feel really like isolated from all the other humans because I had this tragedy that I was
Yeah.
like it was really public. And and while I was grieving that, I had to do my own work and look at my own childhood and my own life. And as I did my best to try to be useful and make the world better, I ended up becoming a therapist. And so the book is about my experience working for her and traveling with her and her son, and then just kind of healing from the trauma of being around that and my own reflection on my life and how I chose to become a therapist and what I'm doing with it now.
Is that something that in that process of self-healing and helping others, is helping others a part of your personal journey and healing?
Well, and there's all these different modalities of therapy, and there's
Hmm.
a modality called feminist therapy, which um, basically like part of the healing process in feminist theory, feminist therapy is that you go out and you help people who've had similar things happen to them so that there's like a
Yeah.
and absolutely like I when I get clients who've survived like high profile crimes or loss of children or anything along those lines, there's an extra like tender focus that I bring to the session. Um, and I do think it's healing for me to get to show up and witness and say, hey, these are all these resources and studies and activities and things out there that you can do to heal. And some
Um,
of them they'll take, some of them they won't. It's their journey, but I get to at least bring something.
yeah, absolutely. The idea of helping others is to me, one of the most selfish things I do because of how good it makes me feel.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that I believe in selflessness when it comes to things like that because I know what I get out of it when I go spend an afternoon at the food bank or doing something like that. I feel great. I feel like I nailed it today. I crushed it. I feel good, and then I can just go on with my life and the normal ego stuff will come back in but for a moment, I feel really good about myself and it's not a bad thing. And you're able to feel a sense of purpose when you
Yeah.
have those, which is so important. I think that we have lives that are often they feel rudderless and they feel like we don't have a purpose, that we are just kind of going through motions. And when you get outside of yourself and help somebody else, and for no other reason than to just be a good human, I think that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point, right? It's energizing in that way. And it's like service is definitely um almost like a spiritual act. Um I think in Buddhism they consider
Hmm.
service like part of the religion. Am I right?
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. No, it's one of I'm not a religious or spiritual person, but that element of it is something that I've always been attracted to. I think there's things you can learn from any religion, any philosophy. There's a reason why people will dedicate themselves to a belief system, and it's important for me to try to learn from others. And I don't have everything figured out. I just know what my personal truth feels like, and it changes on a daily basis. So I can't pretend to have everything figured out by any means, because I think that wouldn't be a lie that I could sell to anyone, especially
Yeah.
myself.
Right. And I think keeping that space to learn and grow with it is really kind of like the one of the one of the best parts of being a human, right? We get to keep going and keep growing. And when we give ourselves that space, it's a lot easier to give it to other people too. And
Oh,
then have a more peaceful day.
absolutely. And the idea that you learn until the day you pass. It doesn't stop. The learning process continues for your entire life, if everything goes typical. That you will learn up until the day you die. And I guess the ultimate truth that you learn, even when you die, there will be something that you learn at that moment. Is there anything beyond? I guess you'll find out in that moment. So it's you learn up until the exact end, and maybe there's learning beyond that. Maybe there's not. I have no idea. So I'm just fascinated by that part of it. I mean, is that the narcissistic tendency in people that we're just really interested in ourselves and how we work?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think if you're kind of looking at the end game and you have awareness that we're all going to die, and you want to try to show up and like be awake and experience this, and you're paying attention to how you affect other people. I think that's maybe a healthy form of self-centeredness, right?
That's true. But there is when it goes too far, when there's it's not about you. There are people sitting in a room having a conversation that's not about you, and that's okay. It's I can't go out because there's, my shoes aren't perfect or there's something off and something feels wrong and nobody's going to care. Nobody's going to notice. It's just you in your head. So most of the time, for me personally, that's one of the struggles that I've had. Just it's not about me, and that's okay. And that's actually for the best.
Yeah. And leaning back into that space to grow.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry I turned this into a personal therapy session. I was not hoping to do that. That was not my goal for this by any means. Yeah, I was just utterly, it's such a fascinating idea. And I'm glad that films are taking the time to involve experts like yourself and loop people in and to, kind of have advisors to make sure that they're getting certain beats right. Because even to a layman, when things feel emotionally honest and reactionary, like the way things kind of fall out, we notice it. Even if we can't put a finger on it and say this wouldn't happen that way, when something's not true, it just feels disingenuous, even if you're not sure of the exact reasons why. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that this movie was really interesting. I think it'll help a lot of people. And it's just kind of like an intellectual puzzle, right?
mm-hmm.
And so many teenagers love to watch horror films.
Yeah.
And if you're a parent and you go with your child and watch this, I mean, you're going to have a really intense conversation afterwards.
I watched it with my wife, and we're gonna watch it with our 14-year-old after.
Excellent.
So yeah, that is definitely that is the plan for this, because all three of us, and eventually the 9-year-old, will see if he buys into the horror thing like the rest of the family. But being a typical American, we can watch horror films as long as there's not me and my wife, whatever, we'll watch anything. But with our 14-year-old son, if there's any sexuality, we're American. We can watch people get their heads chopped off. But if you show like any sense of sexuality, we just shut down, which is just horrible. I know, because sexuality is something we all experience. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but I don't want to think about it with my 14-year-old. So
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, this film is definitely doesn't involve that. So you
no,
know.
no, it has uncomfortable moments, but not in that way.
Yeah.
So yeah, and there's several things with my son that I have apologized for, but I think I need to apologize deeper in a better way, just for coming short in certain ways. And this is just a reminder of that. And that's a really good thing. So
Yeah. Yeah, this film could help some families with that right there, right? Because who hasn't kind of lost their patience a time or two or
well, yeah, it's not even I don't really have the anger thing as much, but it is I could have said something different in that moment, I think is what it really comes down to. Because you never know what are going to be the things that keep somebody up at night 20 years later that just pop into your head. I have those little things. I have memories that I know I hang on to that the other people involved, they have no memory of them. They were such small little moments, but you just, for whatever reason, they have a deep impact. And so, yeah, I just want to make sure that whatever those things are that I've done wrong, that he knows that it was not by design. So
yeah. Well, having that space, right, where we're brave enough to show up and talk about them and he knows that.
I hope so. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this today. I really appreciate it. It was a pleasure to meet you.
Yeah, you too. Thank you. This was nice.
Good. Thank you. And I hope the rest of the writing isn't too painful for you.
No, I'm on the final draft of it
Oh,
now.
wow.
I'm pretty much done.
When do you think it'll be published?
I am submitting it to one agent that wanted to take a peek and then querying a few more in May. So
Well, I'll keep my eyes out for it. I'm setting the Google alert today because
cool.
that sounds like a good book, and I definitely, hopefully, we can do this again, and we'll be talking about your
I would
novel.
love to. Yeah,
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest
yeah,
of your
nice
day.
to meet you.
You
Bye.
too. Bye bye.